All right, let's pick back up. We're at the very bottom of this page. So it reads, a big burst of thunder and lightning that trampled over the roof of the house. So Tea Cake and Motorboat stopped playing. Motor looked up in his angel-looking way and said, Big Massa draw him chair upstairs. I'm glad y'all stopped that crap shooting, even if it wasn't for money, Janie said. Old Massa is doing his work now. Us ought to keep quiet. They huddled closer and stared at the door. They just didn't use another part of their bodies, and they didn't look at anything but the door. The time was past for asking the white folk what to look for through the door. 6 eyes were questioning God. Through the screaming wind, they heard things crashing and things hurtling and dashing with unbelievable velocity. A baby rabbit, terror-ridden, squirmed through a hole in the floor and squatted off there in the shadows against the wall, seeming to know that nobody wanted its flesh at such a time. And the lake got madder and madder, with only its dikes between them and him. In a little wind lull, Tea Cake touched Janie and said, I reckon you wish now you had a stayed in your big house, away from such as this, don't you? Nah. Nah? Yeah, nah. People don't die till they time come nohow. Don't care where you at. I'm with my husband in a storm, that's all. Thank you, ma'am. But supposing you was to die now, you wouldn't get mad at me for dragging you here. Nah, we've been together around 2 years. If you can see the light at daybreak, you don't care if you dies at dusk. It's so many people never get to see the light at all. I was fumbling around, and God opened the door. So consider the reference to the title and the scene and why it's important. So the reference is right here. 6 eyes were questioning God. So the majority of this book is about people fighting their way through difficult experiences to make a better life. And Janie kind of takes the forefront of this, where she's gone through multiple marriages and lived in multiple towns and dealt with a variety of different people. And she's fought her way through difficult experiences and emotions to make a better life for herself. But here we see another theme that shows that nature is all-powerful. And we've seen this theme throughout the book, even though it's been more subtle, where the pear tree has this all-powerful knowledge on how relationships work. And we saw that when the mule died and the buzzards or vultures, they marched around the body and essentially kind of foretold of Jodi's death and the fact that things die. And so we've seen this theme that nature has this all-powerful knowledge. And now this hurricane is an all-powerful act of God that they can't fight against. And so there's this connection, very transcendental, if you think about it, this connection between nature and God, where nature is kind of this avenue by which God can communicate and act. And so the hurricane is a powerful act of God, which is why the 6 eyes were questioning God, where Tea Cake, Janie, and Motorboat are wondering if God is going to protect them during this storm, or if they'll be harmed or possibly die. So let's pick back up in the reading. He dropped to the floor, this is Tea Cake, dropped to the floor and put his head in her lap. Well then, Janie, you meant what you didn't say, 'cause I never knowed you was so satisfied with me like that. I kind of thought. The wind came back with triple fury and put out the light for the last time. They sat in company with the others in other shanties, their eyes straining against crude walls, and their souls asking if he meant to measure their puny might against his. Where the he and his, this is referencing God, you can kind of tell that because the he and his are capitalized. They seemed to be staring at the dark, but their eyes were watching God. And here we have another direct, very direct reference to the title of the book, indicating to us that this is a very important part of the novel, because the whole book's named after this part. As soon as Tea Cake went out pushing wind in front of him, he saw that the wind and water had given life to lots of things that folks think of as dead, and given death to so much that had been living things. Water everywhere, stray fish swimming in the yard, 3 inches more and the water would be in the house, already in some. He decided to try to find a car to take them out of the glades before worse things happened. He turned back to tell Janie about it, so she could be ready to go. Get our insurance papers together, Janie. I'll tote my box myself and things like that. You got all the money out of your dresser drawer already? Nah, get it quick and cut up a piece of the tablecloth to wrap it up in. Us liable to get wet to our necks. Cut a piece of that oilcloth quick for our papers. We gotta go, if it ain't too late. The dish can't bear it out no longer. He snatched the oilcloth off the table and took out his knife. Janie held it straight while he slashed off a strip. But Tea Cake, it's too awful out there. Maybe it's better to stay here in the wet than it is to try to... He stunned the argument with half a word. Fix, he said, and fought his way outside. He had seen more than Janie had. Janie took a big needle and ran up a longish sack, found some newspapers and wrapped up the paper money and papers, and thrust them in and whipped over the open end with her needle. So how is the suspense building in this scene? So Tea Cake asked Janie if she's still happy to be with him, considering the fact that they might die in the hurricane. And Janie says all she wants to be with is her husband. And Tea Cake explains that he didn't know she was so satisfied with him. And so in this moment, Tea Cake's realizing just how much Janie truly loves him. And we still have this reiteration of the reference to the title of the book, but their eyes are watching God. And so even though we have this very sweet and lovely moment between Tea Cake and Janie, there's still tension building outside of the house where they are. And Tea Cake goes outside and realizes just how bad it is outside and that they need to leave immediately. So let's pick back up. Before she could get it thoroughly hidden in the pocket of her overalls, Tea Cake burst in again. Ain't no cars, Janie. I thought not. What are we going to do now? We gotta walk. In all this weather, Tea Cake? I don't believe I can make it out of the quarters. Oh yeah, you can. Me and you and Motorboat can all lock arms and hold one another down. Motorboat? Motor? He's asleep on the bed in yonder, Janie said. Tea Cake called without moving. Motorboat! You better get up from there. Hell done broke loose in Georgie. This minute. How can you sleep at a time like this? Water knee-deep in the yard. They stepped out in the water almost to their buttocks and managed to turn east. Tea Cake had thrown his box away, and Janie saw how it hurt him. Dodging flying missiles, floating dangers, avoiding stepping in holes, and warmed on the wind now at their backs until they gained comparatively dry land. They had to fight to keep from being pushed the wrong way and to hold together. They saw other people like themselves struggling along. A house down, here and there, frightened cattle, but above all, the drive of the wind and the water, and the lake. Under its multiplied roar could be heard a mighty sound of grinding rock and timber and a wail. They looked back, saw people trying to run in raging waters and screaming when they found they couldn't. A huge barrier of the makings of the dike to which the cabins had been added was rolling and tumbling forward. 10 feet higher, and as far as they could see, the muttering wall advanced before the braced-up water like a road crusher on a cosmic scale. The monstropolis beast had left his bed. The 200-mile-an-hour wind had loosened his chains. He seized hold of his dikes and ran forward until he met the quarters, uprooted them like grass, and rushed on after his supposed-to-be conquerors, rolling the dikes, rolling the houses, rolling the people in the houses, along with other timbers. The sea was walking the earth with a heavy heel. The lake is coming, Tea Cake gasped. The lake, in amazed horror for Motorboat. The lake. It's coming behind us, Janie shuddered. Us can't fly. But we can still run, Tea Cake shouted, and they ran. The gushing water ran faster. The great body was held back, but rivers spouted through fissures in the rolling wall and broke like day. The 3 fugitives ran past another line of shanties that topped a slight rise and gained a little. They cried out as best they could, "The lake is coming," and bar doors flew open, and others joined them in flight, crying the same as they went, "The lake is coming," and the pursuing waters growled and shouted ahead, "Yes, a-comin'," and those who could fled on. They made it to a tall house on a hump of ground, and Janie said, "Let's stop here. I can't make it no further. I'm done give out." "All of us is done give out," Tea Cake corrected. "We's goin' inside out this weather, kill or cure." He knocked with the handle of his knife while they leaned their faces and shoulders against the wall. He knocked once more, then he and Motorboat went around the back and forced the door. Nobody there. "These people had more sense than I did," Tea Cake said as they dropped to the floor and lay there panting. "Us oughta went out with Elias like he asked me." "You didn't know," Janie contended. "And when you don't know, you just don't know. The storm might not have come sure enough." They went off to sleep promptly, but Janie woke up first. She heard the sound of rushing water and sat up. "Tea Cake, Motorboat, the lake is comin'." So what's happening in this action sequence? So the seawall is breaking. It hasn't completely broken. but the seawall has been almost completely destroyed, allowing the lake to move into the low-lying land. And so what we'll see in a minute is, oh, I think we're on the wrong page. Okay, so the seawall is breaking and a wall of water is carrying people away. And so it hasn't completely broken yet, but it's starting to move inland, and some people have already been lost to the water. And so Janie, Tea Cake, and Motorboat run for higher ground, and they take refuge in a tall house so that they can rest because they're exhausted from having to run so much. All right, so let's see what continues to happen in this action sequence. So the lake was coming on, slower and wider, but coming. It had trampled on most of its supporting walls and lowered its front by spreading, but it came muttering and grumbling onward like a tired mammoth just the same. This is a high, tall house. Maybe it won't reach here at all, Janie counseled, and if it do, maybe it won't reach the upstairs part. Janie, Lake Okeechobee is 40 miles wide and 60 miles long. That's a whole heap of water. If this wind is shoving that whole lake this away, this house ain't nothing to swaller. Us better go. Motorboat? What do you want, man? The lake is coming. No, it ain't. Yes, it is so coming. Listen, you can hear it way off. It can just come on. I'll wait right here. Get up, Motorboat. Let's make it to the Palm Beach Road. That's on a fill. We's pretty safe there. I safe here, man. Go ahead if you wants to. I'm sleepy. What are you going to do if the lake reach here? Go upstairs? Suppose it come up there. Swim, man, that's all. Well, goodbye, Motorboat. Everything is pretty bad, you know. Us might get missed of one another. You sure is a grand friend for a man to have. Goodbye, Tea Cake. You ought to stay here and sleep, man. No use going off and leaving me like this. We don't wanna. Come with us. It might be nighttime when the water hem you up in here. That's how come I won't stay. Come on, man. So in this action sequence, the seawall has almost been completely destroyed, allowing the lake to move into the low-lying land. And Tea Cake knows that they need to leave, and so Tea Cake and Janie are going to leave, but Motorboat refuses to go. He wants to stay because he's exhausted, and so they have to leave Motorboat behind. So let's keep reading. Tea Cake, I gotta have my sleep, man, definitely. Well, goodbye then, Motor. I wish you all the luck. Going over to Nassau for that visit with you when all this is over. Definitely, Tea Cake. My mama's house is yours. Tea Cake and Janie were some distance from the house before they struck serious water. Then they had to swim a distance, and Janie could not hold more than a few strokes at a time, so Tea Cake bore her up till finally they hit a ridge that led on towards the fill. It seemed to him the wind was weakening a little bit, so he kept looking for a place to rest and catch his breath. His wind was gone. Janie was tired and limping, but she had not had to do that hard swimming in the turbulent waters, so Tea Cake was much worse off. But they couldn't stop. Gaining the fill was something, but it was no guarantee. The lake was coming. They had to reach the 6-mile bridge. It was high and safe, perhaps. So in this next part, I want you to consider Hurston's stylistic choices because they really help build the suspense of the scene. Everybody was walking the fill, hurrying, dragging, falling, crying, calling out names hopefully and hopelessly. Wind and rain beating on old folks and beating on babies. Tea Cake stumbled once or twice in his weariness, and Janie held him up. So they reached the bridge at 6-Mile Bend and thought to rest. So let's just pause and take a look at this little paragraph here. So what Hurston is doing, she has these simple sentences and even sentence fragments that she's building onto one another to create this sense of intensity. And she also uses kind of a fancier term that we call asyndeton, which is where you don't use any conjunctions, no ors or no ands. And she does that here with the hurrying, dragging, falling, crying, calling out names hopefully and hopelessly. Technically, grammatically, there should be an and here, but she drops it to create that kind of rhythmic building of things where we see kind of image after image of people struggling against the hurricane. And then we also have this repetition of beating, where the wind and rain beating on old folks and beating on babies. And so the building of these different kind of stylistic choices are the things that are making this scene feel so intense. And we've seen it throughout the preceding paragraphs where she's been using these stylistic choices to create this tone of intensity and suspense. All right, so we're going to pause here and we'll pick back up in our last video of the chapter, part 3. See you in a minute.